Hey folks, Daniel here with Slow Haste. So for today's video, I wanted to make a part 2 to my OP-1 versus Digitakt series. Here's a card to the first video in that series somewhere around here. But in that video, I break down the fundamental differences between the Teenage Engineering OP-1 and the Elektron Digitakt. They are the two most utilized pieces of hardware in my setup. They're both fully functional standalone audio workstations that I use all the time to craft entire songs on. And I really like to showcase and highlight some of the differences in the workflow and the final output that you get from each of the devices. So for this particular video, I was actually inspired by the Midlife Synthesist, who is a synth YouTuber who created an OP-1 versus Digitakt video comparing the sampling audio quality. And he does a blind listening test. And I was thinking about it recently, and I kind of wanted to take it to the next level and look at what the creative output looks like if you're using the same samples on both devices. You can very clearly hear a difference in the audio quality, so I wanted to see just how the creative workflow I approach on each device would affect the final output, knowing that there would probably be a pretty drastic difference even if I'm using the same samples. So I have 6 percussive sounds and then 2 melodic sounds. One of them is a chord pad and the other is a melody lead. The sounds are a combination of stock Digitakt sounds and samples from Blank Form's Tape Haze sample packs. I think it's a combination of Tape Haze 3 and 4. If you've been watching my channel and my Digitakt stuff, you've heard dozens of those samples. I love those packs. I use them all the time. And I'm just going to play the audio samples for you right now. So here they are. And just to be clear, I recorded those from the Digitakt into Logic because they were already in a project, and the Digitakt sound quality is undoubtedly better than the OP-1's. In fact, I loaded the samples from the Digitakt into the OP-1 just by playing the audio through the sampler. So again, this is not an audio quality test. This is like a creative process and workflow test. So my goal was to make a jam of about a minute or 2 in length on each device. So I'll play those for you. And then I'll kind of discuss how I used each device to arrange and compose those jams with the samples that I just played for you. All right, so let's get started by taking a listen to the Digitakt jam. Okay, and let's listen to the song that I made on the OP-1. As you can see, there are quite a few sonic differences between the two machines, and this is the kind of stuff that you'll encounter on Reddit threads and Google and other forums if you look anything up online. The OP-1 is really kind of lo-fi, crunchy, and dirty sounding. It overdrives really easily, which I take advantage of a lot. I really like the kind of digital saturation you get out of that. And the Digitakt just sounds so clean and cool and crisp. And it's funny because I feel like thematically, with the two boxes themselves, it kind of makes sense. With the Digitakt, you have like the sleek, cool metal chassis that's literally cool to the touch. And the OP-1 is a more quirky looking, toy-like device. And I say toy-like just in terms of appearance because of the colorfulness and the different geometric shapes that are featured in the interface. I definitely don't think it sounds like a toy. So yeah, I think it's really interesting that the creative output that comes from, the different workflows that I implement on each device kind of reflect the actual physicality of each machine. And I don't know if that's a subconscious thing or I'm thinking into it too much, but that's just how I feel. So let's jump into a little bit of a breakdown on how I came to arrange each of these tracks. So really quickly, just to show you the breakdown of the two patterns I'm using. First, I will play the percussion from part 1. And that beat repeats, and then the chord pad just plays as such. As a swell, and then I crank the bit rate when I switch back to the pattern after playing the second pattern. And then the second pattern, here I'll play the drums. The only addition is on sample 6. We have a tom that has some trig conditions set up on these last steps. So sometimes it results in a roll as the pattern repeats. We'll see if that happens. I think the likelihood is like 30 to 40% on each of the hits. Cool. And then the melodic components. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward how I used the chord as a chord with progression, and then how I used the lead line as a melody. It came pretty naturally. The workflow is fairly straightforward, and I think the sequencing-based workflow lent itself to things kind of acting as they normally would in a compositional and arrangement perspective. And the Digitakt is absolutely great for that type of workflow. So I think the best way to explain my OP-1 approach is just to play you through a bit of each of the 4 tracks, because I took the samples directly out of the Digitakt and put them into the synth and the drum sampler accordingly. And then I tracked 4 kind of like patterns in the mixer by doing a bunch of overdubs on the tape tracks, and then I brought them in and out to kind of build up the song. So this is that main chord progression, or the chord sample, and that just repeats. And then after that plays for a bit, I brought in the drums. And these are the same drum samples, and you can clearly hear how different they sound compared to the Digitakt. I think it's pretty obvious, as I mentioned, that the Digitakt just sounds way cleaner by nature. So if that's something that you're looking for, it's something to take into consideration. But the OP-1 definitely has a character of its own. And then on tracks 2 and 3, I played some of the melodic samples through the arpeggiator and just messed around with some, I guess you could call it automation, with the volume as I recorded it down to the tape. And I put some auxiliary percussion on each of those tracks as well. So that's that kind of fluty, hazy melodic sample. with the snap sample too, as you can clearly hear. And then for 3, I was a little bit more experimental and did a couple of like washes with the volume. So as you record, you can turn the volume up and down. You can also adjust the tape speed as you record, and it records that automation. It records that movement. So you can hear that on the pad sound on this track. And then halfway through, I brought in that arpeggiator again with the volume being automated. So that I love how that kind of turned out. And then I played this bass synth, which is that fluty sample pitched way down. And I did the best I could to get that to come through clearly, but I did have a bit of difficulty with that. I don't think that's a knock, because you can do some sound design stuff to help out samples. But to be fair, it wasn't necessarily like a bass sample or a sample that I would have used for a bass sound in the first place, but I wanted to stick with these samples, so I tried to make it work. And then I also use these momentary buttons. So this is that momentary switch. It turns the reverb way up. And that's really fun to use for rhythmic swells. And then my second one, I believe, is, yep, it's set to flatten the EQ, or cut the highs and mids. So yeah, those are super fun to use as momentary rhythmic effects. As I mentioned in my first Versus video, my workflow on these 2 devices is pretty drastically different. I utilize the digital tape on the OP-1 more like a real tape machine, where I'm just doing overdubs and layers. And I think it leads to a lot more sonic variation within a more confined loop. I tend not to expand on ideas and progressions as fully, but I think that each progression I make is a little bit more sonically detailed and intricate. Whereas the Digitakt, it's really easy to make a lot of patterns with chord progressions and different variances in the arrangements. But I tend to stick with the set sound of the samples that I'm using as more traditional instruments as I'm arranging. And I know that I can expand on that with the trig conditions, but even with the trig conditions, I tend to just alter the sounds dynamically, and I don't tend to spruce it up as much as I would with like weird effects or even different sounds as I would on the OP-1. And I think that does lend itself to kind of more traditional electronic music, as one might expect with a sequencing-based device, whereas the OP-1 is less guided in its workflow. So yeah, I don't think either one of the devices is objectively better in this context. This, again, was just more so a creative experiment for myself to see what the output would look like. And maybe it's because I've been playing both of the devices for quite a while now, but it kind of lived up to my expectations of what those final songs would sound like. I'd love to hear if any of you folks have done anything similar, using the same set of samples in kind of a restrictive, creative fashion on different devices to see what the outcome is. And honestly, it would be super fun to make more of these videos if any of you have samples that you want to suggest I use to try the same thing. I'd also love to hear if you have any sort of contrary experiences with either of devices in terms of your workflows or what you think they excel at. I really like chatting with you guys down in the comments, so definitely let me know. And also, if you made it this far and are enjoying the video, consider subscribing to the channel and give me your feedback. I'd love to know what kind of content you guys would like to see from me. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos, and I plan on doing it for a while, so I'd definitely like to deliver what y'all are gonna wanna watch. Anyways, another shout out to Blank Forms for these samples, a shout out to the Midlife Synthesist for kind of inspiring this idea with his Digitakt and OP-1 video, and a shout out to y'all for watching and hanging around till the end. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Peace.